The ship hummed softly as it moved through the darkness of space. Inside the engine room, Mina worked alone. Her hands moved quickly over the control panel, checking numbers and adjusting settings. She liked working in the engine room. It was quiet here. Nobody bothered her. Nobody stared. Mina was small for a human, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore the standard gray uniform of a coalition engineer, but her sleeves were always pulled down to her wrists. On her hands she wore special gloves, thick dark material that covered her fingers completely. She never took them off in public. The ISS Horizon Dawn was a big ship, home to over 200 crew members. Humans worked alongside aliens from different worlds. The largest group of aliens aboard were the Vraxil, tall creatures that looked like walking lizards. They had green scales that shimmered in the light, and their bodies were covered in patterns that glowed softly. The patterns changed color when they felt strong emotions. The Vraxil were warriors. Everyone knew this. They came from a culture that valued strength and combat above everything else. They wore their battle scars proudly like medals. The more scars a Vraxil had, the more respect they received from their people. Mina heard footsteps behind her. Heavy footsteps. She turned and saw Commander Kravix entering the engine room. He was the tallest Vraxil on the ship, standing over 7 feet high. His scales were deep emerald green, and golden patterns marked his chest and shoulders. Those golden patterns meant he was important, a proven warrior with many victories. Behind Kravix walked a smaller Vraxil. This was Kesh, the commander's son. Kesh was young, maybe 12 years old by human counting. His scales were lighter than his father's, more gray than green. His patterns were dim and flickered nervously. Vraxil children always traveled with their warrior parents to learn how to be strong. Kravix looked around the engine room with cold eyes. He did not like engineering spaces. To him, they were boring places where soft people did soft work. Real warriors fought with weapons, not tools. Mina straightened up and gave a small nod of respect. She did not speak. She had learned that Kravix did not care what humans had to say. The commander walked closer, his sharp eyes scanning the equipment. Then he noticed what Mina was doing. A coolant relay needed repair, and the work required careful hand movements. Mina had removed her gloves and set them on a nearby tool cart. Her hands were visible now. The skin was twisted and scarred, covered in thick patches of damaged tissue. The scars ran from her fingertips all the way up to her elbows. They were old scars, healed but permanent. Even the best medical technology in the coalition could not completely fix burns this severe. Kravix stopped walking. His eyes focused on her hands. Then he laughed, a harsh barking sound. "What happened to you, human?" he said loudly. "Did you burn yourself making dinner? Or perhaps you played with machinery too advanced for your kind?" 2 other engineers were working nearby, a human named Borum and a 6-armed Kellian named Thrix. They both stopped working when they heard Kravix's words. They looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Nobody challenged Commander Kravix. Mina felt her face grow hot. Shame burned in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. She had heard comments like this before. Some people saw her scars and assumed she was careless or stupid. They never asked what really happened. She picked up her gloves and pulled them back on, covering her damaged hands. She did not look at Kravix. She did not defend herself. She just went back to work, her movements stiff and mechanical. Kravix made a dismissive sound and turned to leave. To him, the matter was finished. He had made his joke. The weak human had been reminded of her place, but Kesh did not follow his father immediately. The young Vraxil stood very still, staring at Mina. His patterns flickered with colors his father could not see. Curiosity mixed with something that looked like concern. Kesh had seen scars before. His father was covered in them. Every adult Vraxil warrior bore marks from battles. Scars were proof of courage. They were beautiful. They were sacred, but Kesh had no scars. He was young and untested. He worried constantly that he would never be brave enough to earn them. He worried he would disappoint his father. When Kesh looked at Mina's hands, he did not see clumsiness. He saw scars that covered nearly all of her skin from fingers to elbows. Scars that deep, that extensive, came from something terrible, something painful. Something survived. "Kesh," Kravix called from the doorway. "Come, we have inspections to complete." Kesh turned and hurried after his father. But he looked back once at Mina before the door closed behind him. Mina waited until they were gone. Then she let out a long, slow breath. Her hands were shaking inside her gloves. She hated this feeling, the shame, the anger, the old pain that never quite went away. Borum walked over quietly. "You okay?" she asked. Mina nodded. "I'm fine." "He's an ass," Borum said firmly. "Everyone knows it." Mina almost smiled. "Thanks." She went back to her work, but her mind kept drifting. She thought about Kravik's words. She thought about the way people looked at her hands. Most of all, she thought about the things she tried hard never to think about, the day she got these scars. Later that evening, Mina finished her shift and walked through the empty corridors toward her quarters. The ship operated on a 24-hour cycle, and it was currently the night shift. Most of the crew were sleeping. As she passed through a junction near the cargo bay, she heard a sound. Footsteps. Light footsteps. Not heavy like an adult's. Mina turned and saw Kesh standing in the shadows. The young Vraxo looked nervous, his patterns dim and shifting. "Lieutenant Park," Kesh said quietly. His galactic standard was careful and formal. "May I speak with you?" Mina was surprised. She glanced around, wondering if this was some kind of prank. "But they were alone. What do you need?" she asked. Kesh stepped closer, his young face serious. "Your hands," he said. "The scars." "I saw them." Mina tensed. Here it came, more questions, more mockery, more pity. She started to turn away. But then Kesh asked a question that stopped her cold. "Were you forged in battle too?" Mina turned back slowly. She stared at the young Vraxil. His patterns glowed with genuine respect and curiosity. He was not mocking her. He was asking because he truly wanted to know. For a long moment, Mina did not know what to say. Nobody had ever asked her that question. Nobody had ever looked at her scars and seen anything except damage. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet. "That depends," she said, "on what you mean by battle." Mina led Kesh to a small maintenance room deep in the lower decks. It was cramped and filled with spare parts and toolkits. Nobody came here unless they needed to fix something. It was private. She sat down on a metal supply crate. Kesh stood near the door, waiting. His patterns flickered nervously, casting soft blue light on the walls. "Why do you want to know about my hands?" Mina asked. Kesh hesitated. Then he spoke carefully. "In my culture, scars are sacred. They prove a warrior faced danger and survived. My father has many scars. Each one tells a story of honor. But I have none. I am young, untested. Sometimes I fear I will never be brave enough." He looked at Mina with wide, earnest eyes. "When I saw your hands, I thought you must be a great warrior. Your scars cover so much skin. They must have come from something terrible. I wanted to know if humans have warriors too. If you earned your marks in battle." Mina was quiet for a long time. She looked down at her gloved hands. Nobody had ever asked her this. Most people saw her scars and looked away quickly, embarrassed. Or they assumed she had been careless, stupid, weak. But this young Vraxil looked at her with respect. "I was not always an engineer," Mina said finally. 7 years ago, I worked as a rescue technician. My job was to help people when ships had emergencies. I was part of a team." Kesh sat down on the floor, listening carefully. Mina continued. "I was assigned to a civilian transport ship called the Maiden's Hope. It was a colony ship, carrying 800 people to a new world. Families, children, people looking for a fresh start." She paused, gathering her thoughts. The memories were painful, but they were also clear. She remembered every detail. 3 weeks into the journey, something went wrong. The ship's reactor started overheating. We tried to fix it using the automated systems, but they failed. The reactor core was melting down. If it exploded, everyone on the ship would die. Kesh's patterns brightened with alarm. "What did you do?" "My team rushed to the reactor room," Mina said. There was a manual override, a set of controls that could flood the reactor with coolant and shut it down safely. But the override was inside the reactor chamber itself, and the chamber was already filling with superheated plasma and radiation. She slowly removed her gloves. Her scarred hands looked strange in the dim light. Twisted skin, patches of discolored tissue, fingers that did not quite bend the right way anymore. "We had protective suits," she continued. "Heavy suits designed to protect us from extreme heat and radiation. The engineers said the suits could last maybe 90 seconds inside the chamber. But the manual override needed at least 2 minutes of work, maybe longer if the controls were jammed." Kesh understood immediately. Someone had to go in knowing they might not survive. Mina nodded. My team leader was a man named Jiho. He was older than me, more experienced. He was also a good friend. When we realized what needed to happen, we both knew someone had to volunteer. I said I would go. I was smaller and faster. I knew the reactor systems better than anyone else on the team. Jiho did not want me to do it, but there was no time to argue. 800 people were depending on us. She stared at her hands, remembering. I put on the suit and went inside. The heat was unbearable. Even through the protective layers, I could feel it pressing against me. The air shimmered. Alarms screamed in my helmet. The suit's sensors kept warning me that I was in danger, that I needed to leave immediately. But I kept moving forward. I reached the override panel. I started working on the controls. They were stuck, corroded from the heat, jammed. I had to force them. I pushed as hard as I could. Kesh leaned forward, his young face tense. What happened? Mina's voice was steady, but her eyes looked distant. The gloves started smoking. The heat was so intense that the protective material began to melt. It melted right onto my skin. Then the gloves burned away completely. My hands touched the controls directly. The metal was hot enough to burn through flesh in seconds. I screamed, but I did not let go. I could not let go. If I stopped, everyone would die. I forced the controls into position. The coolant system activated. It flooded the reactor chamber. The temperature dropped. The meltdown stopped. Kesh's patterns glowed bright orange, the Vraxil color for awe and respect. You saved everyone. Yes, Mina said quietly. All 800 people lived. But I collapsed right after. My team dragged me out of the reactor chamber. I spent 6 months in medical treatment. The doctors used every technology available to heal my hands, but the burns were too deep. They did the best they could, but my hands will always look like this. She looked at Kesh. So yes, in a way I was forged in battle. Not the kind of battle your people fight, but a battle nonetheless. Kesh was silent for a moment. Then he asked, do you regret it? Do you wish you had not gone inside? Mina's expression darkened. There is something else you should know. When the reactor was stabilizing, the chamber door needed to be sealed from the outside. Someone had to stay behind to lock it manually. Otherwise, the coolant would leak out and the meltdown would start again. Jiho did it. My team leader. He sealed the door and saved everyone, but he did not make it out. The radiation levels were too high. By the time we could open the door again, he was gone. Her voice cracked slightly. So every time I look at my hands, I see Jiho's face. I see the man who died so that I could live, so that 800 others could live. I do not regret going into that reactor chamber, but I carry the weight of his sacrifice every day. These scars remind me of what was lost. They remind me that surviving is not always the same as winning. Kesh looked down at his own unmarked hands. When he spoke, his voice was soft. You are forged, like my father, but different. Your scars are not about victory. They are about sacrifice, Mina nodded slowly. Yes, that is the difference between humans and Vraxil, I think. Your people seek scars as proof of strength. My people try to avoid them. But when scars come, we carry them. We remember why we earned them. Kesh stood up. His patterns had shifted to a deep purple, the color of thoughtfulness and respect. Thank you for telling me your story, Lieutenant Park. I will not forget it. Mina put her gloves back on. Why did you really want to know, Kesh? The young Vraxil looked uncertain. My father is a great warrior. Everyone respects him. But I am small, weak. I worry I will never be like him. I worry I will never earn my own scars, my own honor. When I saw your hands, I thought maybe there were other ways to prove courage. Maybe honor does not only come from battle. Mina stood and placed a hand on the young Vraxil's shoulder. You are braver than you know, Kesh. Coming here to ask me about this took courage. Questioning what you have been taught takes courage. Do not measure yourself only by your father's standards. Kesh nodded, his patterns brightening slightly. Then he left quietly, disappearing into the corridor. Mina sat alone in the maintenance room for a long time afterward. She had not spoken about Jiho in years. She had not talked about the Maiden's Hope to anyone except medical staff and official investigators, but telling Kesh felt right. The young Vraxil had not pitied her. He had not mocked her. He had simply wanted to understand. Maybe, she thought, her scars could mean something more than pain. Maybe they could be a bridge between two very different cultures. 3 days passed quietly. Mina returned to her normal routine, working in the engine room and avoiding crowds. She did not see Kesh again during that time. She assumed the young Vraxil had returned to his regular duties with his father. Then, on the fourth day, everything changed. Mina was deep in the ship's lower engine section when the alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the corridors. The ship's automated voice announced in calm, measured tones, "Warning! Proximity alert. All personnel report to stations immediately." Mina ran to the nearest control panel and pulled up the ship's status display. What she saw made her blood run cold. The Horizon Dawn had entered an uncharted debris field. Ancient wreckage surrounded the ship, pieces of old vessels, fragments of stations, remnants of a space battle that happened centuries ago. But that was not the worst part. Dozens of proximity mines floated in the debris field. Old mines, ancient weapons from a long-dead war. They should have been dormant, inactive. But somehow the ship's engines had activated them. Now they were armed and dangerous, surrounding the vessel on all sides. Any sudden movement could trigger them. Any energy surge could set off a chain reaction that would destroy the entire ship. The ship's shields were up, holding the mines at bay. But shields required massive amounts of power. The readings showed they could maintain the shields for maybe 30 minutes. After that, the power would drain completely and the ship would be defenseless. Mina's communicator buzzed. It was Captain Taewon. All senior staff to the bridge now. Mina ran through the corridors. Other crew members were moving quickly to their stations, their faces tight with worry. Everyone knew they were in serious danger. The bridge was crowded when she arrived. Captain Taewon stood at the center, a tall human man with gray hair and sharp eyes. Around him gathered the senior officers, the navigation chief, the weapons officer, the medical director, and Commander Kravix with his security team. Kesh stood at the back with other junior personnel, watching everything with wide eyes. Captain Taewon spoke quickly. "Status report. The ship is trapped in a minefield. Our shields are holding but will fail in 28 minutes. We need options." The navigation officer, a Kellian named Thrix, checked her displays. "We cannot move without triggering the mines. They are too close. Any engine activity will be detected." The weapons officer, a human named Do-hyun, shook his head. "We cannot shoot them all. There are too many, and weapons fire might trigger a chain reaction." Captain Taewon turned to Mina. "Lieutenant Park, you are our engine specialist. Is there any way to move the ship safely?" Mina stepped forward, her mind racing. She had been studying the mine patterns on her datapad during the run to the bridge. These were old Vortan mines, weapons from a civilization that died out 300 years ago. She had read about them in historical engineering texts. "There might be a way," she said slowly. "These mines are ancient. They operate on a very specific frequency detection system. If we can adjust our engine output to emit a counter-frequency, we might be able to convince the mines that we are not a threat." Captain Taewon leaned forward. "How long would that take?" "The calculations are simple," Mina said. "But the adjustment has to be made manually from inside the engine core itself. And it must be done while the engines are running hot. The person doing it would be exposed to extreme heat and some radiation." The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Kravix spoke up, his voice cold. "Send the human engineers. This is their responsibility. They maintain the engines. Let them fix the problem." He looked directly at Mina when he said it, his eyes dismissive. The implication was clear. Human lives were less valuable than Vraxil lives. Mina felt anger flash through her, but she kept her voice calm. "I will do it." Captain Taewon looked at her seriously. "Lieutenant, you understand the risks?" "Yes, sir. But I am the most qualified person on this ship to make the adjustment. I know these engine systems better than anyone else, and we do not have time to debate." Before the captain could respond, a young voice spoke up from the back of the bridge. "Father, she is a warrior. You should honor her." Everyone turned. Kesh had stepped forward, his small frame trembling but his patterns glowing bright orange with determination. Kravix's scales darkened with anger. "Silence, Kesh. This is not your concern. Return to your place," but Kesh did not back down. "She was forged in battle. I know her story. She saved 800 lives once before. She held burning metal with her bare hands and did not let go. She is a warrior, father, just like you." The bridge was completely silent now. All eyes turned to Kravix. The Vraxil commander's patterns flickered with conflicting emotions, anger, surprise, and something that might have been shame. Mina did not wait for his response. She turned to Captain Taewon. "Permission to proceed, sir." The captain nodded. Granted. How much time do you need? 10 minutes. Maybe less, then move. We will monitor from here. Good luck, Lieutenant. Mina left the bridge at a run. As she passed Kesh, their eyes met briefly. The young Vraxel gave her a small nod. Mina nodded back. She reached the engine room in less than 2 minutes. Her hands were already shaking as she pulled on the heat-resistant suit. It was not as heavy as the one she wore on the Maiden's Hope, but it would have to be enough. She sealed the helmet and checked her oxygen supply. 10 minutes. She had 10 minutes to get in, make the adjustments, and get out before the shields failed. As she approached the engine core access hatch, memories flooded back. The Maiden's Hope, the screaming alarms, the unbearable heat, Jiho's voice telling her to get out to save herself. She pushed the memories away. There were 200 people on this ship. They were depending on her. She could not fail. Mina opened the access hatch and stepped inside the engine core chamber. The heat hit her immediately, even through the protective suit. The engines were running at 70% capacity to maintain the shields. The air shimmered with heat waves. Red warning lights pulsed on every surface. Mina moved to the manual control panel. Her gloved hands worked quickly, accessing the frequency modulation controls. She began making the calculations, adjusting the output wavelength to match the counter frequency that would pacify the minds. 3 minutes passed. Then 5, the heat was getting worse. Her suit's cooling system struggled to keep up. At 6 minutes, one of the controls jammed. The adjustment wheel would not turn. Mina pulled harder, but it was stuck. Her communicator crackled. Captain Taywin's voice came through, tight with tension. Lieutenant Park, status report. Almost there, sir. Just one more adjustment. She pulled at the control wheel with all her strength. It would not budge. The heat was making the metal expand, jamming the mechanism. Then another voice came through the communicator. Kravix. His tone was different now, respectful, almost gentle. Lieutenant Park, my son tells me you are a warrior. Prove him right. Do not fail. Mina was so surprised she almost stopped working, but the words gave her something to hold on to. Something to fight for. She gripped the control wheel again. She pulled with everything she had. The wheel turned. The adjustment locked into place. The engines began emitting the new frequency. On the bridge displays, the mines started changing color, shifting from angry red to calm blue. One by one, they went dormant. Mines are deactivating, someone shouted on the bridge. The horizon dawn began to move, gliding carefully through the debris field. The mines did not react. The counter frequency worked perfectly. In the engine core, Mina collapsed against the wall. Her hands were burning inside her gloves. She looked down and saw smoke rising from the protective material. Not again, she thought distantly. Then everything went dark. Mina woke in the medical bay. White lights glowed softly above her. The air smelled clean and sterile. Machines beeped quietly nearby, monitoring her vital signs. Her hands hurt. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the screaming pain she remembered from 7 years ago, but a deep, throbbing ache that spread from her fingers to her wrists. She tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pressed her back down. Dr. Hana, the ship's chief medical officer, stood beside her bed. Easy, Lieutenant, Hana said. You have been unconscious for 6 hours. Your body needs rest. Mina looked down at her hands. They were wrapped in thick regenerative bandages that glowed with a soft blue light. The medical gel inside the bandages would help her skin heal faster. How bad is it? Mina asked, her voice hoarse. Dr. Hana checked her datapad. You have second-degree burns on both hands. Not as severe as the scars you already carry, but significant. The heat damaged some of the newer skin grafts from your previous injuries. You will need to wear the regenerative bandages for at least 5 days. But I will heal? Yes, you were lucky this time. The exposure was shorter. The suit protected you just enough. Hana paused, her expression serious. But Lieutenant, this cannot keep happening. Your hands have already endured so much damage. Another injury like this could cause permanent loss of function. Mina nodded slowly. She understood. But she also knew she would do it again if she had to. The ship? Mina asked. Did we make it through the minefield? Hana smiled. We are safe. Your frequency adjustment worked perfectly. The mines went dormant and we escaped without a single casualty. You saved everyone, Lieutenant. Again. The door to the medical bay opened. Captain Taywin entered, followed by several other crew members. They gathered around Mina's bed, their faces showing relief and respect. "Lieutenant Park," Captain Taywin said formally, "on behalf of the entire crew, I want to thank you. Your actions today saved 200 lives. That is a debt we cannot repay." Mina felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I was just doing my job, sir." "No," the captain said firmly. "You went far beyond duty. You risked your life knowing the cost. That is courage of the highest order." The other crew members nodded in agreement. Mina saw Borum standing near the back, smiling with tears in her eyes. Even Thrix, the usually stoic Kellyan, raised one of her 6 arms in a gesture of respect. Then the door opened again. Commander Kravix entered with Kesh close behind him. The room fell silent. Everyone watched as the tall Vraxil commander approached Mina's bed. His patterns were muted, showing colors Mina had never seen on him before, shades of deep blue and purple that indicated humility and regret. Kravix stopped beside the bed. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he placed his right fist over his heart, the Vraxil gesture of honor given only to respected warriors. "Lieutenant Park," he said, his voice formal but sincere, "I have wronged you. I mocked your scars without knowing their meaning. I dismissed your courage without understanding its source. For this I apologize." Mina was too surprised to speak. She had never expected this. Kravix continued, "My son taught me a lesson I should have learned long ago. Honor comes in many forms. Your people carry scars not from seeking glory, but from protecting others. That is a courage my people have forgotten." He lowered his fist. "You are a warrior, Lieutenant. I recognize this now." Mina found her voice. "Thank you, Commander. Your words mean more than you know." Kesh stepped forward then, his young face serious. In his hands he held something small, a carved stone disc about the size of a coin. Intricate patterns covered its surface, glowing faintly. "This is a Vraxil honor token," Kesh explained. "We give them to warriors who show exceptional courage. I want you to have mine." Kravix looked at his son with surprise, but he did not object. Kesh placed the token on Mina's bedside table. "Thank you, Kesh," Mina said softly. "I will treasure it." The young Vraxil's patterns glowed bright orange, the color of pride and joy. "You were forged twice now. Once 7 years ago and again today. You are stronger than any warrior I know," Mina smiled. "I am not stronger, Kesh. I am just stubborn." Kesh tilted his head, his patterns flickering with amusement. "Is that not the same thing?" Everyone in the medical bay laughed, a warm, genuine sound that eased the tension. Captain Taywin cleared his throat. "The lieutenant needs rest. Everyone out. You can visit again tomorrow." The crew filed out slowly, each person stopping to offer words of thanks or gestures of respect. Kravix and Kesh were the last to leave. At the door, Kravix turned back. "Lieutenant," he said, "when you recover, I would be honored if you would teach my son about engineering." He expressed interest in learning how ships work. "I believe you would be an excellent teacher." Mina was touched by the request. "I would be happy to teach him, Commander." Kravix nodded once, then left with his son. Dr. Hanna checked Mina's vital signs one more time. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Mina admitted, "and my hands hurt. But otherwise I am fine. Good, sleep now. I will check on you in a few hours." Hanna dimmed the lights and left. Mina lay in the quiet medical bay, staring at the ceiling. Her bandaged hands rested on her chest. She could feel her heartbeat through the pain, steady, strong, alive. She thought about Ji-Ho. She thought about the maiden's hope. She thought about all the people she had saved, both then and now. For 7 years she had carried her scars like a burden, a reminder of loss, of pain, of the friend who died while she lived. But today something had changed. Kesh had looked at her scars and seen honor. Kravix had looked at them and seen courage. Maybe her scars did not have to be only about pain. Maybe they could mean something more. Mina picked up the honor token Kesh had left. The carved patterns caught the dim light glowing softly. She turned it over in her bandaged hands, careful not to drop it. This small stone represented everything that had changed. A young Vraxil had questioned his culture's assumptions. A proud warrior had admitted he was wrong. And a human engineer had proven that strength came in many forms. Mina closed her eyes, still holding the token. She thought about Kesh's words. "You were forged twice now." Yes, she thought. I was forged, but not destroyed. Shaped but not broken. And now perhaps she could help forge others. She could teach Kesh. She could show him that courage did not always mean violence. that scars did not always come from glory, that the strongest warriors were sometimes the ones who protected rather than attacked. Outside the medical bay, the ship hummed as it traveled through space. The engines ran smoothly, the crisis passed. 200 people slept safely in their quarters, unaware of how close they had come to death. Mina drifted toward sleep, her hands throbbing with pain but her heart lighter than it had been in years. She had saved them all, and this time she had not lost anyone in the process. That was enough. 2 weeks after the minefield incident, the Horizon Dawn arrived at Coalition Station Meridian for resupply and shore leave. The station was massive, a floating city in space with docking bays for hundreds of ships. Thousands of people from dozens of different species lived and worked there. The crew was excited for the break. Most planned to explore the station, visit the entertainment districts, or simply rest in quarters larger than their cramped ship cabins. But before anyone could leave, Captain Taiwan called for an assembly in the main hangar bay. Mina stood near the back of the gathered crew. Her hands had healed well. The regenerative bandages were gone now, replaced by thin protective wraps that would stay on for another few days. The new burns had added fresh scars to her already damaged skin, but Dr. Hana assured her there would be no permanent loss of function. Captain Taiwan stood on a raised platform so everyone could see him. Beside him stood several coalition officials who had come aboard to conduct the ceremony. The entire crew was present, 200 souls packed into the hangar. Today, Captain Taiwan began, his voice echoing through the space, we honor one of our own. Lieutenant Mina Park, please come forward. Mina felt her stomach drop. She had not expected this. Around her, crew members stepped aside, creating a path to the platform. Everyone was staring at her. Borum gave her a gentle push. Go on, you earned this. Mina walked forward slowly. Her face felt hot. She was not used to being the center of attention. As she approached the platform, she saw Kravix and Kesh standing in the front row with the other Vraxel security personnel. Kesh's patterns glowed bright with excitement. Mina climbed the steps to the platform. Captain Taiwan smiled at her warmly. One of the coalition officials stepped forward, a tall woman with silver hair and a formal uniform covered in ribbons and medals. She held a small case in her hands. Lieutenant Mina Park, the official said, her voice clear and strong. You are hereby awarded the Coalition Medal of Valor for exceptional courage in the face of extreme danger. Your actions on this ship, both 2 weeks ago and 7 years ago aboard the Maiden's Hope, represent the highest ideals of service and sacrifice. You saved over 1,000 lives through your bravery and skill. The Coalition recognizes and honors your service. The official opened the case. Inside lay a medal, a silver star suspended from a blue ribbon. She pinned it to Mina's uniform just above her heart. The entire crew erupted in applause. The sound was deafening. Crew members shouted and cheered. Some whistled. Others clapped their hands or appendages together with enthusiasm. Mina stood frozen, overwhelmed. She looked out at the sea of faces, humans, Vraxel, Kellians, and others, all showing genuine respect and admiration. These people saw her. They understood what she had done. Captain Taiwan placed a hand on her shoulder. You deserve this, Lieutenant. Thank you for everything you have done. Mina managed to speak, though her voice shook slightly. I was just doing my duty, sir. No, Captain Taiwan said firmly. Duty is following orders. What you did was far beyond that. You risked everything twice to save lives. That is heroism. The ceremony concluded and the crew was dismissed for shore leave, but many people stayed behind to congratulate Mina personally. They shook her hand carefully, mindful of her injuries, and thanked her with words that made her eyes sting with tears. When the crowd finally thinned, Mina found Kravix waiting. The Vraxel commander stood with his arms crossed, but his patterns showed calm blue, the color of peace and respect. Lieutenant, Kravix said, extending his hand in the human fashion. May I speak with you? Of course, Commander. They walked to a quieter corner of the hangar. Kesh followed at a respectful distance, giving them space to talk. Kravix spoke carefully. I wanted to thank you properly, not just for saving the ship, but for teaching my son a lesson I could not. He looks at you with such respect. He talks about you constantly. You have shown him that strength comes in many forms, Mina smiled. Kesh is a good kid. He has courage. He just needs to learn how to see it in himself. You are teaching him that, Kravik said, and you are teaching me as well. I have lived my entire life believing that only warriors who fight in battle deserve honor. But you have shown me a different kind of warrior, one who endures, who sacrifices, who protects. Your people understand something mine have forgotten. He paused, then added, I would be honored to call you a friend, Lieutenant. Mina was touched. She extended her hand, and Kravik shook it firmly. His grip was strong but careful, mindful of her injuries. I would like that, Commander, Mina said. Kesh approached then, his patterns glowing with excitement. Lieutenant Park, are you ready for our lesson? Lesson? Mina asked. You promised to teach me about engineering, Kesh reminded her. Father said I could spend time in the engine room learning from you. Mina looked at Kravik, who nodded. The offer still stands. I believe engineering knowledge would serve him well, regardless of whether he chooses a warrior's path. Then yes, Mina said to Kesh. I would be happy to teach you. But not today. Today we rest. When we leave the station, your lessons will begin. Kesh's patterns flashed orange with joy. Thank you, Lieutenant. As Kravik and Kesh left to explore the station, Mina stood alone in the hangar. She looked down at the metal pinned to her chest. The silver star gleamed in the light. For so long she had seen her scars as marks of failure, proof that she had not been fast enough, strong enough, skilled enough to save everyone. Jiho's death had haunted her for 7 years. She had hidden her hands, avoided attention, tried to make herself invisible. But now she understood something new. Her scars were not marks of failure. They were proof of survival. They were evidence that she had faced impossible choices and did not run away. They were connections to the people she had saved and the friends she had lost. And now her scars had become bridges. They had connected her to Kesh, who saw honor where others saw damage. They had changed Kravik's mind about what it meant to be a warrior. They had shown an entire crew that courage came in many forms. Mina left the hangar and walked through the ship's corridors. Eventually, she found herself in the engine room, her favorite place, her sanctuary. The engines hummed softly, at rest while the ship was docked. She sat on one of the tool crates and removed her protective wraps. Her hands looked worse than ever now, with fresh scars layered over old ones. But when she looked at them, she did not feel shame anymore. These hands had held burning metal and refused to let go. These hands had saved over 1,000 lives. These hands would teach a young Vraxil that strength came from within, not from scales and claws. Mina thought about Jiho. She wished he could see her now. She wished she could tell him that she had finally found peace with what happened on the Maiden's Hope. She wished she could show him the medal, the honor token, the respect she had earned. I did not let go. She whispered to the empty room. Not then, not now. I kept my promise, Jiho. I kept fighting. The engines hummed in response, a steady rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. Mina wrapped her hands again and stood up. There was work to do. There would always be work to do. Ships needed maintenance. Systems needed monitoring. And now, a young student needed teaching. She was ready for all of it. 1 week later, the Horizon Dawn left Station Meridian and resumed its mission. Mina stood in the engine room showing Kesh how to calibrate a power relay. The young Vraxil listened carefully, his patterns flickering with concentration and curiosity. Why do you love engineering? Kesh asked as they worked. Mina thought about the question. Because engineering is about building things that protect people. Every system on this ship exists to keep the crew safe. Every adjustment we make gives them a better chance of survival. It is quiet work, but it matters. Like being a warrior, Kesh said thoughtfully. But instead of fighting enemies, you fight against danger itself. Mina smiled. Yes, exactly like that. They worked together in comfortable silence. Outside the engine room, the ship moved through space, carrying its crew safely toward their next destination. Inside, a human engineer and a young Vraxil learned from each other, building a friendship that crossed the boundaries of species and culture. Mina had been forged twice, once in the reactor of the Maiden's Hope, and again in the engine core of the Horizon Dawn. Each time, the fire had shaped her, scarred her, changed her, but she had not broken. She had endured. And now she would help forge others, not through fire and pain, but through patience, knowledge, and understanding. 2 weeks after the minefield incident, the Horizon Dawn arrived at Coalition Station Meridian for resupply and shore leave. The station was massive, a floating city in space with docking bays for hundreds of ships. Thousands of people from dozens of different species lived and worked there. The crew was excited for the break. Most planned to explore the station, visit the entertainment districts, or simply rest in quarters larger than their cramped ship cabins. But before anyone could leave, Captain Taiwan called for an assembly in the main hangar bay. Mina stood near the back of the gathered crew. Her hands had healed well. The regenerative bandages were gone now, replaced by thin protective wraps that would stay on for another few days. The new burns had added fresh scars to her already damaged skin, but Dr. Hana assured her there would be no permanent loss of function. Captain Taiwan stood on a raised platform, that was the human way, not seeking glory but protecting others, not pursuing scars but carrying them with quiet dignity, not breaking under pressure but bending, adapting, surviving. Mina looked at her scarred hands and felt something she had not felt in 7 long years. Pride. She was a warrior. Not because she sought battle, but because she had faced it when necessary. Not because she wanted scars, but because she earned them protecting others. Not because she was strong, but because she was stubborn enough to never let go. That was what it meant to be human. And that was why humanity would always survive.